The December wind screamed across Route 89 like something wild and desperate, turning the Vermont mountainside into a frozen wasteland that swallowed cars whole. Alexander Hayes wasn't most drivers. The CEO of Manhattan's most ruthless private equity firm had built his fortune on refusing to surrender, even when nature itself demanded submission. His black Mercedes struggled against the blizzard, windshield wipers fighting a losing battle as snow piled higher with each passing minute. Through the white chaos, a faint glow caught his attention. Thompson's Mountain Diner, its vintage neon sign flickering like a lighthouse in the storm. Before he could change direction, his car skidded sideways and came to rest in a snowbank. Engine dead. Alexander cursed under his breath, pulling his expensive overcoat tighter as he fought through knee-deep snow toward the diner. The bell above the door chimed as he stumbled inside, bringing a rush of freezing air. He wasn't alone. Scattered throughout the humble restaurant sat 14 other stranded travelers, all wearing the same expression of expensive disbelief. Behind the counter stood a young man who seemed entirely unbothered by the chaos outside. Marcus William Thompson moved with quiet efficiency, his dark hair catching the warm light as he poured fresh coffee into mismatched cups. At 24, he possessed an understated grace that made the cramped diner feel somehow more spacious, more welcoming than it had any right to be. "Welcome to Thompson's," Marcus said simply, his voice carrying the soft cadence of someone who'd learned to speak carefully. "Storm's got us all trapped tonight, but we'll make sure you're comfortable." As the evening wore on, Alexander watched Marcus work with growing fascination. The other stranded executives complained loudly about the accommodations, but Marcus handled each tantrum with patient dignity, serving hearty portions of what he called Comfort Storm, a dish that somehow managed to taste like childhood memories and warm embraces. The old man behind the kitchen pass, Tom Thompson, observed everything with knowing eyes. At 62, he moved carefully, his weathered hands betraying old pain, but his gaze remained sharp. Alexander caught him watching the interaction between Marcus and the difficult guests, noting how the younger man's kindness never wavered. As midnight approached, Marcus had transformed the diner into something approaching shelter. Makeshift sleeping areas appeared in back booths, extra blankets materialized from hidden storage, and the coffee never stopped flowing. Alexander found himself helping without quite knowing why, drawn by Marcus's quiet leadership and genuine care for strangers. "You didn't have to stay up all night taking care of us," Alexander said as Marcus wiped down tables in the early morning hours. The storm had finally begun to ease, but neither man seemed eager to acknowledge that their time together was ending. Marcus paused, meeting Alexander's eyes directly. "That's what you do when people need help. You don't think about what you have to do. You just do what's right." The simplicity of the statement struck Alexander like a physical blow. In his world of calculated moves and strategic advantages, Marcus's genuine kindness felt revolutionary. When Highway Patrol finally arrived to clear the roads, Alexander found himself reluctant to leave this warm bubble of humanity. As he drove back toward his ordered life, Alexander couldn't stop thinking about warm brown eyes and the revolutionary idea that genuine goodness might still exist in the world. Sometimes the storms that seem like disasters turn out to be the forces that blow us exactly where we need to be. Love rarely announces itself with fanfare. More often, it arrives quietly, disguised as kindness offered without expectation of return. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to Heart Stories for more tales proving that love conquers all. 3 weeks later, Alexander sat in his Manhattan penthouse office, staring at a photograph on his computer screen. The image showed Marcus behind Thompson's counter, hands dusted with flour, creating what appeared to be some kind of artisanal pastry. The Instagram account belonged to Mountain Chef VT, and the more Alexander scrolled through the posts, the more questions arose. These weren't the simple comfort foods of a small-town diner. Marcus's dishes displayed the technical precision and artistic vision of someone trained in serious culinary arts. The knife work was professional, the plating sophisticated, the flavor combinations innovative. The drive back to Vermont felt different in clear weather. Thompson's Mountain Diner looked smaller in daylight, its weathered exterior somehow more honest than intimidating. Marcus looked up as the bell chimed, his expression shifting from welcome to wariness when he recognized his visitor. "Mr. Hayes," Marcus said carefully, his professional smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Back for more comfort, Storm. I've been thinking about you," Alexander said simply. "About that night, about the food you made for us. I did some research." Marcus's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "What kind of research?" "The kind that reveals someone with your obvious talents doesn't end up in a place like this by accident. You're not just some small-town cook, are you?" "Marcus." Finally, Marcus sat down across from him, his hands folded tightly in his lap. "My real name is Marcus Ashford. Marcus Ashford III, if you want the full story. 3 years ago, I was sous chef at Le Bernardin in New York City. I had everything I thought I wanted." Alexander felt something cold settle in his stomach as the name registered. Ashford, the hotel empire his firm had helped dismantle years earlier. Marcus described falling in love with his brother Jonathan, the clandestine meetings, stolen moments, the intoxicating danger of a love that couldn't exist in daylight. When their relationship was discovered, Jonathan had chosen preservation over truth, denying everything and positioning himself as the responsible son while Marcus was cast out completely. "They used everything I told him in private to orchestrate the takeover." Marcus continued, his voice steady despite the pain in his eyes. "Jonathan positioned himself as the one who tried to protect the family from my poor judgment. I was no longer welcome in their world." Alexander felt the weight of unintended complicity settling on his shoulders. His firm had backed that acquisition, though he'd never paid attention to the human cost of their financial maneuvering. "That's when I came here," Marcus finished quietly. "Tom found me sleeping in my car at a rest stop. He offered me work and a place to stay without asking for my story. All he said was that everyone deserves a second chance. But the sanctuary's peace was already under threat. Since the viral story of that storm night, the Westshire Baptist Church had begun organizing community concern meetings. Their message was clear: traditional values were under attack, and Thompson's Diner had become a symbol of moral decay. Tom emerged from the kitchen, moving with the careful gait of someone whose body bore old military injuries. His weathered face showed the strain of recent weeks, and Alexander saw something familiar in the older man's eyes. The look of someone who'd spent decades hiding fundamental truths about himself. As Alexander prepared to leave, he pressed an envelope into Marcus's hand. Inside was a check for $50,000 and a simple note: "For real food and real courage. Keep fighting for what's right. This isn't charity," Marcus said carefully. "No," Alexander replied. "It's an investment in the kind of person I hope I can learn to become. When we're brave enough to share our deepest truths with others, we create the possibility for genuine connection. Sometimes the most powerful response to someone's vulnerability isn't advice or solutions, but simply the promise that they won't face their battles alone." The Hen of the Wood restaurant in Waterbury had the kind of understated elegance that Marcus remembered from his New York days. Alexander had chosen the location deliberately, hoping to remind Marcus of the culinary world he had been forced to leave behind. Marcus studied the menu with professional interest, his fingers tracing descriptions of dishes that spoke his native language. Duck breast with maple gastrique, foraged mushrooms prepared 3 ways, locally sourced cheese plates that read like love letters to Vermont's agricultural heritage. "You miss it," Alexander observed, watching Marcus's face as he absorbed the familiar complexity of serious cooking. "Every day," Marcus admitted, "but missing something and being able to return to it are different things." As their meal progressed, Marcus found himself sharing stories he'd kept buried for years. He described his grandmother's maple syrup operation in rural Quebec, how she taught him that cooking was really about creating comfort for people who needed healing. Her recipes had been his first introduction to transforming simple ingredients into something that could mend hearts as well as hunger. Their conversation was interrupted by Alexander's phone ringing with urgent insistence. Tom Thompson's name appeared on the screen, and Alexander's stomach dropped as he answered. The words came in fragments, Tom's usually steady voice shaken and unclear. Veterans Administration Hospital, trauma episode, Marcus needed immediately. They found Tom in the psychiatric wing, sitting rigidly beside his bed, his eyes fixed on something only he could see. The attending physician explained that Tom had suffered what they termed a severe trauma recurrence. Recent stress from the diner's local controversy and the approaching anniversary of a significant combat loss had triggered flashbacks. Marcus sat beside Tom's bed, speaking in low, soothing tones about safe things. Gradually, Tom's breathing slowed and his grip on reality strengthened. "I thought I was back there," Tom said quietly. Charlie Company. January 68. "We lost 3 good men that day, and I never told anyone why it hurt so much to lose Jimmy." Alexander watched understanding pass between Marcus and Tom, the recognition shared by people who'd both paid the price for love that couldn't speak its name. They were leaving the hospital when Jonathan Ashford appeared, his expensive sedan having followed them. Still handsome in the polished way that opened doors, still carrying himself with the confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences. "Hello, Marcus," Jonathan said, his tone suggesting they'd parted on friendly terms rather than in betrayal and heartbreak. "What do you want?" Jonathan Marcus asked, proud that his voice remained steady. "I want you to stop making our family look bad with your little revenge fantasy. This fraud investigation you've been threatening could hurt innocent people." The word innocent hung in the air like smoke from a fire that had never been properly extinguished. Jonathan's composure cracked when Alexander stepped protectively closer to Marcus. The accusation that followed hit Marcus like a physical blow, revealing how completely Jonathan had rewritten their history as mere experimentation rather than love worthy of fighting for. That's when Alexander stepped forward, his voice carrying authority. "You need to leave. Now, later." As they sat in the diner's kitchen, Marcus reached for Alexander's hand. The touch was tentative, questioning. But when Alexander's fingers closed around his, it felt like coming home. "Sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones we've loved deepest," Marcus said quietly. "But that doesn't mean we have to keep letting them define our worth. Healing from betrayal requires not just time, but the courage to remain open to new love. When we've been hurt by someone we trusted completely, every new relationship feels dangerous. But the alternative, building walls so high that no one can reach us, isn't protection. It's a prison of our own making." The evidence arrived in boxes that filled Alexander's private investigator's office, like accusations waiting to be proven, bank records, email threads, witness statements, all painting a picture of systematic fraud that went deeper than anyone had initially suspected. Jonathan hadn't just betrayed his brother's confidence. He'd been stealing from people who trusted him with their life savings. The military veterans charity had been his most audacious target. Donations meant to support housing for homeless former soldiers had been redirected through shell companies, eventually ending up in Jonathan's personal investment portfolio. Marcus stared at the documentation, his face cycling through emotions too complex to name. Relief that his instincts had been correct. Grief for the family legacy that would be forever tainted. Fear about what would happen when this information became public. He stole from people who'd already given everything for their country, Marcus said quietly. People like Tom. But Jonathan hadn't remained idle. Within hours of the fraud allegations being filed, local media received anonymous tips about Marcus's personal life, complete with carefully edited photographs that suggested moral corruption. The Westshire Baptist Church's congregation suddenly swelled with concerned citizens who'd never shown interest in spiritual matters before. Their Sunday sermon focused on protecting traditional family values from outside influences. Marcus watched the protesters gather in Thompson's parking lot through the kitchen window, their signs calling for moral decency and community protection. Some faces belonged to people who'd eaten his food without question. Others were strangers, bussed in to amplify the appearance of local outrage. That afternoon, Tom Thompson did something he'd never done in 70 years of careful living. He called the editor of the Stowe Reporter and requested a meeting. The editorial appeared on the front page the next morning, written in Tom's honest voice. He described his military service, his decades of hiding fundamental truths about himself, and the cost of living in silence. He wrote about finding Marcus broken and alone, recognizing in the young man's pain an echo of his own struggles. Most importantly, he wrote about Jimmy Kowalski, the soldier he'd loved and lost in Vietnam, whose memory he'd carried in silence for 50 years. "I served this country for 4 years and kept its secrets for 50 more. Tom's editorial concluded, "I've watched good people destroy themselves rather than live honestly." Marcus Thompson saved my life by showing me that courage doesn't always look like charging into battle. Sometimes it looks like serving coffee with kindness. The editorial's impact was immediate and polarizing. Support letters arrived from veterans across New England. But the backlash was equally swift, with angry phone calls and threats that forced Tom to temporarily close the diner. Alexander made his own public statement during a Vermont public radio appearance, ostensibly to discuss regional economic development. Instead, he addressed the fraud investigation and his relationship with Marcus. "Business partnerships require trust," he said calmly. "When someone uses that trust to steal from people who've sacrificed for their country, they've committed crimes that go beyond financial fraud." The battle reached its climax during Jonathan's live news conference to defend himself. He appeared confident, surrounded by expensive lawyers, but his composure cracked when FBI agents appeared in the frame. Moving toward the podium, the arrest was broadcast live across New England, Jonathan's carefully constructed facade crumbling as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. The charges read like a catalog of betrayal fraud, embezzlement, violation of nonprofit trust regulations. In the aftermath, Marcus sat in the diner's kitchen with Tom and Alexander, feeling strangely empty despite their victory. "It doesn't feel like winning," he admitted quietly. "That's because it isn't about winning," Tom replied. "It's about truth. Truth doesn't always feel good, but it's the only foundation strong enough to build a life on. Justice isn't always about punishment for those who've done wrong. Sometimes it's about creating space for those who've been wronged to live freely, to love openly, to contribute their gifts without fear. When good people stand together against hatred, they light candles that help others find their way out of darkness." The Vermont mountains wore their autumn glory like a benediction, gold and crimson leaves creating a cathedral of color around Thompson's Mountain Diner. 6 months had passed since Jonathan's arrest. 6 months of healing that had transformed not just the 3 men who lived there, but the entire community. Marcus stood in the diner's garden, now expanded into a proper outdoor event space, adjusting white ribbons that danced in the September breeze. The guest list for their wedding reflected the unconventional family they'd built from choice rather than blood. Former colleagues from Marcus's New York days sat beside local farmers. Veterans from across New England had traveled to honor Tom. Alexander emerged from the diner wearing a simple navy suit that somehow made him look younger, less armored than the corporate warrior who'd stumbled through their door during that December storm. "You ready for this?" Alexander asked, adjusting Marcus's boutonniere with hands that trembled slightly. Marcus looked around at the gathering crowd, seeing faces that represented every chapter of his journey. His parents had arrived that morning, their presence still fragile but undeniably real. Months of family therapy had created space for conversations that should have happened years earlier. "I've been ready my whole life," Marcus replied. "I just didn't know what I was getting ready for." The ceremony began with unexpected drama as military vehicles appeared on the mountain road. Tom emerged in dress uniform. Behind him marched an honor guard of LGBTQ veterans, their presence both a tribute to Tom's courage and a statement about service that transcended narrow definitions of honor. Marcus's vows came first, carrying the weight of every scar and healing that had brought him to this moment. He spoke of learning to trust again after betrayal, of discovering that real strength came not from protecting yourself, but from remaining open despite the risk. Alexander's response was simpler, but no less powerful. He promised to learn Marcus's grandmother's recipes in the language of love that spoke through careful seasoning and patient technique. He vowed to use his privilege not as a shield, but as a bridge. When the minister pronounced them married, the cheer that erupted carried decades of suppressed hope from people who'd finally seen their love reflected and celebrated. The biggest surprise came as evening stars appeared overhead. When the northern lights began dancing across the Vermont sky, aurora borealis was rare this far south, appearing perhaps once in a generation. Guests stopped to stare upward at green curtains of light that shimmered like cosmic approval. The Marcus and Jamie Culinary Foundation would begin an operation the following week, providing scholarships for LGBTQ youth entering the hospitality industry. But beyond formal legacy, something quieter had taken root in that Vermont mountain community. Neighbors who'd learned to look beyond assumptions, young people who'd seen adults choose courage over comfort. As they cleaned up the celebration, Marcus caught himself humming at his grandmother's old songs, recipes transformed into melody. The maple trees that had witnessed their vows rustled approval in the night breeze. And somewhere in that sound was the promise that love like theirs would continue growing. Season after season. What does it mean to love without limits? To build family from choice rather than obligation? To transform pain into purpose that helps others heal? Sometimes the greatest revolutions happen not in grand gestures, but in quiet acts of daily courage. In refusing to let others' fear dictate our capacity for joy. How will you choose to love more bravely in your own life if this story touched your heart? Please like and subscribe to Heart Stories for more tales of love conquering fear. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that prove love always finds a way.